national field.
Ultimate objective is the businessmen, the SMEs that the chambers have in their membership. We help the chambers so they can help their membership and provide more service.
Reflections of a world that called for decisive action from all stakeholders to forge a positive path for development in the face of vast challenges and uncertainties.
By breaking down the barriers to free trade and developing the economies of poor nations, the International Chamber of Commerce believes the world will be a stronger and better place to live. The group that originally referred to itself as the Merchants of Peace is looking to spread its vision around the globe.
Arbitration has become the favorite, if not really the exclusive way of dealing with disputes in the international field.
Ultimate objective is the businessmen, the SMEs that the chambers have in their membership. We help the chambers so they can help their membership and provide more service.
Reflections of a world that called for decisive action from all stakeholders to forge a positive path for development in the face of vast challenges and uncertainties.
By breaking down the barriers to free trade and developing the economies of poor nations, the International Chamber of Commerce believes the world will be a stronger and better place to live. The group that originally referred to itself as the Merchants of Peace is looking to spread its vision around the globe.
Arbitration has become the favorite, if not really the exclusive way of dealing with disputes in the international field.
Good morning, everyone. It's a lovely morning to say hello to you all to ICC's Leadership Talk, Reshaping Global Supply Chains, What to Expect After the Pandemic. I think this is one issue that we were very excited to sit down and have a conversation. This certainly has been one of the top question marks throughout the pandemic as we look into 2021 with the continuancy of the pandemic and sort of what are the long-term impacts that the pandemic will have in company operations and how the global economy will reshape itself. I think there are a lot of question marks, but we do have a top level team today to try to help us figure out some of the trends, what are the traps, and what are the things that make more sense as we're sort of going to the second year of this pandemic. I want to welcome Altair Rossato, who is the CEO of Deloitte Brazil. Welcome, Altair. Welcome, Cami Saidi, who is the head of Latin America Supply Chain and Manufacturing Operations at HP. Welcome, Cami, and as well as Margie van Gogh, who is head of Supply Chain and Transport at the World Economic Forum. And just doing a little notice, Margie unfortunately has the threat of perhaps energy shortages, which happens at interconnected world, but during the pandemic. So we'll try to take advantage of her as much as we can. And before we begin, I want to thank Le Fossey Law Firm, who has been very generous and supportive for today's leadership talk. So Margie, I'll start with you, go to Altair, and then Cami sort of going down on the global perspective in a very sort of what the title of the event already says, what to expect after the pandemic. This is an interconnected economy, world economy. What can we expect for global supply chains? Margie, we can't hear you. I think it's just not me.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Sorry about that. And good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you, Gabriela, for the opportunity to contribute and to learn from this panel. Many open questions, as you say, and I think what is evident is that for the past at least 20 years or longer, many companies have been looking at how to optimize supply chains, primarily to drive efficiency, using year-over-year cost reduction as a metric for what success looks like. However, the events of the past several years, not just as a result of this pandemic, but certainly accelerated by the pandemic, from trade tensions to climate-related disruptions have changed the risk profile for global supply chains. And we need to take a look a little bit more broadly at what resilience means. It's estimated, I guess, by a number of different studies that significant disruptions to production occur every 3 to 4 years on average. And that adds a significant burden to CEOs and boards of directors and investors and operations leaders. And, you know, I was reading some recent research that said that as much as 45% of 1 year's earnings could be lost each decade because of such disruptions. So risk management and how we use 21st century technology and agile mindsets to be able to accommodate for risk, potentially predict some of that risk. And we are starting to see that companies are demonstrating more flexibility. There is more resilience. Not everything is bad that's come out of this pandemic. We have been able to and can generate new value and profitable growth long term, but this really does require collaboration. It requires collaboration between and across sectors. It requires public and private collaboration, and it most certainly requires a mindset of inclusivity at various leadership levels. And that is what is the primary ingredient, in my opinion, for resilience in the future associated with disruptions that we are yet to even envisage. Gabriela?
Yes, sorry, just froze there just for a little bit, but these are really good points and we'll certainly go back to them. To your, you know, is cost reduction still the only metric? How do you generate collaboration between public and private, global collaboration? But I wanted to go to Altair.
Yeah, I can go, Gabriela. Thank you very much. I think, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here and share some thoughts. As I told Cami, Gabriela, and Margie at the warm-up, I'm not a specialist on the operation of supply chain, but what I have, it's a big view in terms of what the companies need to do, what the supply chain needs to be doing to reshaping the chains and so on. So, and one of the things that I do every week, I talk to at least one CEO of big companies, and most of the time I talk to 2 or 3, and it's 100% of them put supply chain as their first priority. It is amazing how important is this area and how this touched the strategy. And the reason I think Margie touched that, but I want to put some color on that, because it's easy that we all know that technologies need to be put in place for supply chain, like cloud, robotics, analytics, artificial intelligence, cognitive technologies, and so on, blockchain, IoT. But all of those tools touch 2 basic things of any enterprise company around the world. Is first, increase revenue, second, reduce cost. Huge opportunity for both of them. Serving better your clients, understand them better throughout analytics, throughout IoT, which is going to be critical and fundamental for the future of reshaping of supply chain. So it's on the table of most of the CEOs or all the CEOs that I talk on a weekly basis. This is just to begin with. And then we can talk later on a few statistics that Deloitte has presented at the World Economic Forum, and I noticed Margie is fully aware of that. That was on top of the priorities like resilience, collaboration that Margie touched, but also a few other things that we need to reflect on, like connection, industrial agreements that should be done, and this is one of the priorities on that. And especially for Brazil, I think tax is very critical, how we combine the tax complex environment in Brazil with the logistics and supply chain. I've seen most of the companies do not know how to do it because internal debates. So one push for the one side, the other push for the other side, and they never get to a great alignment on that to be efficient. So this is just to begin with. The team and the team is very broad, Gabriela.
And I think we'll certainly get back to that, Altair, in terms of, I think your point of this is top of mind for the CEOs. And as we were discussing just before we came on the air, it will be really important to have leadership involved in this and sort of understanding what it all means. Kami, going to you, you represent companies here. How are you looking at this? How much has changed? How is HP preparing for 2021 and any reshaping?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Gabriela, for ICC creating this opportunity to share experiences, and also welcome Altair and Margie to the team to learn with them as well. Well, as Altair and Margie mentioned, this is a very critical situation. I would say the term VUCA word that we used to have for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, we thought we had seen everything, and we realized that it's not enough. So at HP, we have business continuity plan, or we thought for every possible situation, but when it comes to unprecedented situation like this pandemic, obviously you realize that it's not enough. And in supply chain, we can see that over the past decade, supply chain function raised from to be an operational function inside the company to see that board level to be a strategic part of the business, because we can see how the business is evolving and how supply chain can define the success or failure of almost every company. So in this situation, what pandemic generated, it's a X-ray of what you are doing, how you are doing, but also what are the opportunities in front of you. Obviously, when you face this kind of unprecedented situation, when you realize that back in February last year, when we saw the initial sign of COVID, obviously there was a panic in every places, and with the lockdowns, etc., our first reaction was basically closing all the networks. We cannot have flow of the products to the countries that they are locked down, and you cannot even know where to store or where to sell it. And 2 months later, you are in the opposite direction. You realize that everything is coming to virtualization, dematerialization. Everything you need to do from home, from the home office, from office to home office, from schools in front of the screen, from the stores to online purchasing, etc., and the need of computers, devices, technology to make the job done. And it became an essential product, everything for all we do, even having this session. So this created the opposite direction, basically from stopping the supply chain rapidly to accelerating supply chain. So, and this is not easy. We had to add 100,000 workers in China in matter of few weeks in order to increase capacity. And how you do that in an environment, it's not only about your company, but you rely on a network of supplier partners and even country policies to move things fast. And we realize that this is not enough. Obviously, you try to react as best as you can, but also you realize that there is a bigger conversation around resiliency, how the companies are preparing themselves for resiliency. The initial thought was, okay, if this is a China related issue, let's move to factory in another country or start from there. But it doesn't work because you can move your assembly line to any country you want, but if the network, all the ecosystem is sitting in Asia, you still rely on IC controller, which is in Malaysia with one global partner and country in lockdown. What do you do? Is a $1 product can stop the whole world. Then the notion of the risk management obviously start to come up. And with that, companies start to evaluating what's the profile of the risk I want to manage for my company, not only for my supply chain. Supply chain is an enabler of the company strategy, but in the end, how do I serve my customers? There are many customers, they rely on you to deliver their essential products to run their businesses. And also with dematerialization and virtualization, which is very nice, but it comes also to cybersecurities. Everything you start doing online, the same way that COVID can stop everything, cybersecurity can also. We had many customers that were affected by hackers, etc., that they had to replace entire their company's notebooks and computers. How do you do that in a matter of weeks when your company is locked down due to that? So all these matters come together to basically expand the notion of business continuity to really what resiliency means for a company and even for the countries, and how this conversation is going at C-suite level and even at country and global level to make sure that we have different layers of actions for each and every approach. And as we speak, HP is also in this conversation. As a matter of fact, HP created a new organization called Supply Chain Transformation and Resiliency, which I joined also since the start of this organization to actually be part of this reshaping of the strategy for HP in the next 5-10 years.
Thank you, Kami. And again, a very interesting perspective. And I think it's a good sort of segue into things that Altair and Margie said, but you sort of drilled very much into it, which is the role of technology, right? So if we're thinking about reshaping operations, looking for efficiency to make up for perhaps higher costs in terms of finding other production sites, technology becomes essential. Marty, where are we in terms of technology adoption? Certainly the pandemic has had, as you said, looking for the good side of the pandemic, if one can find it. Where is technology in that? I mean, it accelerated, but Kami also brought another important point, the cyber attack threat. And we've seen that the number of cyber attacks and frauds have really increased as people interact basically like this through the computer, through the internet. How is that a positive thing for supply chains? Are we prepared for it? How much more do we still have to do on that point? We can't hear you, Margie.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Another good question. And I think when one looks at, how much more does one have to do? I think this is an area where we just have to adopt a mindset of more actually is more. We are going to be consistently vigilant in this space. Cybersecurity is one of these incredible challenges to a generation who, sometimes see this as a game. This disruption that can occur. We've all seen the impact on the transport sector that's had over the last number of years in terms of, hacking systems that literally brought to a standstill massive operations, FedEx, DHL, UPS. So the importance of looking at cybersecurity is going to be ongoing. It's going to be continual. There are going to be continual investments that are needed to be made. And here, I think to Althea's point, it's going to be in people, right? We're going to need to make sure that the mindset of our people is continually honed to look at risk, that they're well prepared, that, they're a generation of young thinkers who are bringing to the C-suite the biggest challenges that are being seen in a marketplace, which literally, when we grow up with digital natives, we need to be well aware of. But as outlined, and I'm just coming back to this digital topic, as outlined in, a recent initiative launched by the Forum's digital platform, the events of 2020 have really dramatically accelerated the digitization of economies and societies. If one looks at our latest chief economists survey, which was published in January, a question was posed, what in your view are the pandemic-induced or reinforced developments that are going to have the longest lasting impact? And there were 5 that came out, remote work being amongst them. So when one thinks again about cybersecurity, one now thinks about, a completely different landscape when one is looking at, the impact of remote work in the future. Reinforced historical inequalities. I think when we talk about inclusivity, we really do need to look at what can digital inclusion mean for the reduction of inequality in society. Here, we don't just talk about, business and profit. And I think today we're seeing consciousness at a C-suite level that looks at societal, environmental, and economic and profit impacts for companies. Another one of those developments was really growing market power for tech giants. I think, when we talk about, tax regimes potentially for Brazil, globally, we do need to look at what the role of tech giants is going to be, and then the bigger role for government. And fifth here came out as parallel supply chains and deglobalization. So as we come back to the supply chain topic, it's really interesting to take a look at these 5 major dynamics. And the belief is really that remote work is probably going to be here to stay in some form or other for the long term. The other 4 drivers are really more medium-term phenomena, amongst them inequality, likely to be the longest lasting of these legacies. And we're seeing this around the world, but we're also seeing the pandemic exacerbating and strengthening inequality and creating greater divides. Something that, again, digitization has the opportunity to close: access to information, communication, the ability for small companies to trade and have access to markets. But followed more closely by dominant tech giants and then bigger government. When we look at deglobalization and it being judged as the most temporary, that's really interesting as well for this conversation. It's only by a small margin that it's perceived to be more temporary, but it is very challenging in a globalized world to suddenly have a knee-jerk reaction and localize or regionalize all one's supply chains. And I'm sure here, Cami, from HP's perspective, you have in-depth knowledge about how challenging that really is.
I think these are great points again, Margie, and we'll certainly want to go back to that, especially when we talk about, is globalization dead? Are we talking about a more isolated world long-term or not? Altair, I wanted to sort of take all of these things that Kami mentioned and Margie as well, are these things that, from your conversations with the CEOs, that they are fully aware of, that technology and the way that companies work are, forever going to be changed, that perhaps there's a adaptation in terms of technology savviness that they need to do, that they need to, how do they think about what their priorities are, not just cost reduction? Where are they in terms of, what are their priorities and how much do they actually understand them?
Yeah, very, very important. First connection I'll do with what Cami said about the VUCA, volatility, uncertainty. Now we're talking about a bunny word instead of VUCA, which brings a lot of concepts that it's important to reach resilience. Bunny means brittle, so fragile, anxious, non-linear, and incomprehensive. It's a little bit different than the concept of VUCA back in the 80s. This is a new concept that will stay on for quite a bit, and how we can fight against this type of characteristics of the world. So when the world is not only volatile anymore, but it's absolutely fragile, that can be broken and suddenly, we need to be resilient. And this is why Cami and Margie mentioned resilience so many times, because there is no company that will survive in that environment without resilience. And there is no company that will have resilience if the C-level does not buy it, does not understand the need of the investments. And this is crystal clear to me when I talk to the CEOs, that they clearly understand that technology and diversity are those big topics that they need to work on supply chain. Going back to the bunny word, when we talk about the second ladder, anxious, so the people are no longer more unpredictable, but they are anxious. They are suffering now because they don't know what's going on. So with that, we need to have a lot of emotional connection with your vendor partners, peers, and so on, because that's the best way to understand better this world and avoid anxiety for that. Non-linear is a word that brings us to a loss of cause and consequences. You can have one attitude which is the cause of something that can bring a huge consequences, and vice versa. You can have a lot of effort that brings a small result. So this word is no longer linear, and this brings other type of challenges. And what we had on the VUCA word that was complex type of things and difficult and ambiguous, now we have incomprehensibility. It's quite difficult, and you see this topic, how many things we have to touch in one question. This means that it's not only complex, it's difficult to understand, and this will require people with a lot of flexibility and knowledge that can apply on and try. So it's very important to say that CEOs have that in mind, have in mind that they need to apply a lot of technologies to serve better their clients and serve faster the customers, track the demand. Technology and analytics will be crucial for that, to track the demand and performance of those strategic supply chains. So one data very important that Deloitte Global Resilience Report shared at the World Economic Forum was only 16% of the CXOs that respond to the survey already put in place tools, technology tools on supply chain. This was before the pandemic, but interesting is that this number didn't grow after the pandemic. It grew to 21%, from 16 to 21. I expect it to grow from 80% to 80%. So this is it's a very important information that there's still a lot of things to be done to aid and adapt multiple ways on the technology. I'll stop here to give some room for Cami, but I have a few other things to say on that perspective in terms of data, Gabriela, for international sourcing and how the companies are applying technology and transparency system for technology.
Thank you, Altair. Kami, and I think we're all looking at you to see in practice how it's actually changing. One of the questions I had for you, and I think the number that Altair brought, you know, that the number only went from 16 to 21. I agree with you. We would have expected perhaps a bigger step. Why do you think that is? Is it because companies just don't have the workforce that is educated for that? The systems are not set up for that. Is it what's really sort of stopping companies from making that bigger step?
Gabriela, I think in part is a natural part of evolution and learning, because we have been facing, you know, trade wars, floods, natural disasters. So you learn how to deal with all those things. And when something unprecedented happens, it creates a new era. Actually, we can say, you know, the new normal or what are the future of the world is totally different from, you know, 20 before. So we cannot only use the past to design the future, because the event singularity theory tells you that there are triggers either by events or technologies that boost the way you do things in a different dimension. Let me give you notion of time. In supply chain, time and distance are very critical elements of everything you do, along with cost, you know. So what is time? What 90 days means to all of us? If you are working in a world that you need to travel, to move things, etc., maybe 90 days is one thing, but if you can do things instantly, I don't need to travel anymore to do business meeting. I don't need to travel to do NPI of the products. I can do it instead of in 2 weeks, I can do it in 2 days. I can do it maybe the meeting that was taking preparation for 3 weeks, organizing all the agendas. Now you can do it in half an hour, shorter, faster, more effective. So in that dimension, what 90 days means to you. So this is the first paradigm that we need to overcome, that the dimension and relativity of time has changed as well. So the technology is changing that. So we need to have a different dimension. Is it okay you have a situation that you need 2 years to create a vaccine for the world and taking 3 years to apply it? No, we need to be faster, because that's not only about the supply chain itself, but what's the disaster it creates for whole economy. And obviously technology can help that, you know, technologies that we talk about, how IoT can help, how 5G can help. 5G is not only about the faster internet. 5G means that maybe a doctor can operate, do surgery in another country real time using robotics and all the technology tools. What does do with the wealth distribution? How you can serve needed countries, emerging countries, if you can reach to them faster. So it's a very many dimension that all this creates, and we need to take into consideration these elements and make sure that you have the right people and right technologies to apply it for the best element and best interests of the countries and people. There are other dimensions. Countries, Margie said about, deglobalization or regionalization. we know that people come together very quickly from the humanitarian side. But when it comes to economics, countries, there are a lot of barriers. Environmental policies are growing in every countries. Countries are requesting local manufacturing of the products because government want to boost their industrial policies. There are other countries that they don't want to buy new products. They want refurbished products and carbon footprint. So there are many aspects that it's not only about supply chain, but you need supply chain to make them all work. Everything that you see, somehow there is a supply chain related, either it's physical movement or even virtual movement of the value or store of value. You need to do that. And other technologies like blockchain, that is the revolution of how you connect the world in different dimensions: physical, financial, flow of information, assets, money. So there is a change going on that we need to take into consideration. And don't get me wrong, it's very easy to be resilient at a prohibitive cost. We have not heard when we took our resilience program to the HP leadership team and CEO level, they liked the program, but they said, do it cheaper than we are. So there is still a pressure on cost, that how you use all these talents that Altair was referring to, to do it better and cheaper and faster, because doing faster and more expensive, relatively easier, but doing faster and cheaper and more resilient is the challenge. And obviously in the beginning, it creates you scratch your head how you do that. But as you dive in, you realize that the whole world is changing. There are new technologies coming. You just need to learn and make sure you are fast adopter, how fast you can connect and implement those initiatives. Reaction is key. So this is how we see it and how we are trying to basically manage the equation.
Thank you, Kami. I mean, a lot, and I think there's a lot of sort of really good philosophical, strategic reflection on your part. And I was writing a lot of this down, and there's a lot of very good hooks for us to continue the conversation. There's also a lot of questions coming in, so I'll try to maybe distribute a little bit more. But to your point, Kami, and I'm going to direct this for you, Margie, as Kami was saying, do it better, cheaper, but also more, with more resilience. Obviously, if we look at the country that is perhaps sort of the country that supplies the world, obviously China. I think perhaps a lot of people, we sort of knew there was a lot of dependency on that, but once the numbers come out, there is a shock of how much actually China is part of the world production on various stages. Do we see alternatives, sort of countries that, may not be as cheap, but could provide a lot of other values that producing in China does not? Are they all in China? Are they mostly in Asia, or do we see other regions that could potentially become very good suppliers to sort of try to even it out a little bit?
Gabriela, I mean, I think if we take a look at, trends even in advance of this global pandemic, we were seeing countries in Southeast Asia positioning themselves very successfully as future sources of production. We see this in the apparel sector. We've seen it across a number of different production sectors. So I would say that it's not just the pandemic. Of course, it has thrown a highlight, But again, here, when we look at the opportunities for countries as their populations grow, as we look at, environmental impact on the movement of goods, there has to be some sort of rebalancing. The mobility platform, Shaping the Future of Mobility, is a platform that I basically belong to at the forum, and we focus our efforts on accelerating, a global transition to a safer, cleaner, more inclusive transport system. And that comes through harnessing these new technologies that we keep going back to ensure that there is, more equitable access to mobility for society, and for the sustainable delivery of goods to, urban and rural communities. And if we think about, the balance between cost, productivity, environmental impact, you take all of this into account, there will be to some degree a rebalancing, and there's significant opportunity that presents itself for countries. I mean, if we look at, we're talking about Brazil, and you look at Brazil, it's a phenomenal country, a leading voice in the region. Transportation in Brazil obviously serves a crucial function, and with a country that has the second highest number of airports, in the world, and some of the longest highways and highway systems, you've got soaring demand for your automobile industry. And when we start taking a look at, the almost 200 million people across your country who need to be moving goods, moving themselves, ensuring that inclusivity, the sustainability of of mobility for people and goods, this presents enormous opportunities. Also in terms of the massive industry that you have here. So I think that they're always going to be, this is not just a China versus other. I think it's got to be a combination of what makes sense, what is long-term sustainable, not just from a economic point of view, but from a environmental perspective, from an inclusivity perspective, because we need to create jobs, many more jobs globally. The digital economy is going to provide the opportunity to do that. Again, we talk about the forum's platform for digital inclusion. We've seen, massive acceleration of digitization. We've seen, also rising inequality. We know that, globally, 47% of people in the world are not using the internet. So other economies that are looking to become contributors to and players in global supply chain and production are definitely going to need to look at that. We're going to need to look at policy that enables affordable usage. I mean, affordability targets really are, even in developed countries, are challenging. There are many more services that are going to be required, and if left unchecked, it's going to impact economic growth. It's going to impact the ability for countries to become, productive in terms of a global supply system. And it's going to feed legitimate concerns about inequality and societal inequity. So I think that, a rapid transition to a more universal and affordable 21st century adoption of digital technologies, where governments and business come together to look at how can we use, Kami mentioned it, 5G, how do we include connectivity and cloud services. These are not luxuries. They're necessities for countries who have, development plans that include being part of the global interconnected supply system. And a resilient global interconnected supply system will rely heavily on the adoption of 21st century technology. Insights can only come from collaboration, whether that is across borders, whether it is across companies. Kami, I think, referenced how long, we've taken in the past to develop vaccines. One of the great successes of this pandemic is that the co-opetition, the collaboration between competitors, has resulted in kind of a 9-month to 12-month turnaround on vaccines becoming available. Our big challenge now is, again, a supply chain challenge. How do we ensure that those doses in a coordinated fashion arrive at the same time as the peripherals that are being manufactured all over the world that are needed to put a tip of a needle in an arm. That relies on collaboration. That relies on functional supply systems. If we look at, very practically some of the challenges that we've been faced with, the reduction in air cargo capacity as a result of grounded aircraft because there are no passengers flying, and particularly in the global south, how heavily we rely on belly cargo capacity. If we look at the container shortages globally at the moment around the world, the positioning of those containers, the impact that that's going to have on the movement of peripherals that need to be coordinated at the same time that doses would arrive with air cargo, that is going to potentially impede our ability to accelerate vaccine rollout programs. So supply chain is central, but how we get visibility on that is really the key to improving supply chain operations, to the functionality, to the certainty that we have. And that's going to require interoperable systems. It's going to require data sharing. It's going to require the adoption of distributed ledger technology in the form of blockchain, in order for us to really benefit from the aggregation of data that will inform our ability to predict risk and to respond with agility. And that will also enable us to provide greater outcomes that are common good outcomes that improve outcomes for vulnerable communities in the global south, particularly when we talk now about vaccine distribution, but also when we talk about the Pacific Islands, and we look at rising water levels, and we talk about the environment and decarbonization of transport. So again, very, very broad there, but essential.
I like your overall point, Margie, that, in order for us to get through this, we need more cooperation, not less, not, countries isolating themselves. And I am very conscious of the time. And I think one of the big questions, and perhaps Altair and Cami can help on this one, is there an opportunity for Brazil here? Are Brazilian manufacturers ready to sort of try to step in and become, let's say, a regional supplier? And what, if they aren't, what needs to be done sort of here for that to happen?
Thank you, Gabriela. Just to put a big perspective on that, if we're talking about technology and diversification first, and then I'll bring that to Brazil in your question, Gabriela. Technology and diversification will require investments, and the shareholders and the companies need to bring investment. And this is why Margie touches a lot of environmental and social type of activities that we need to do. So the ESG agenda and governance also will drive that, because the company that has no governance will not attract those investments. Governance will drive that. The agenda, ESG agenda, will drive investors to bring the requirement resources to that. So there is a big shift on the capitalism right now that we will probably recognize 15, 20 years from now, that 2020 was a mark to shift from the shareholders' capitalism, where the companies were more interested in present results to the shareholders, and now we're shifting to the stakeholders, because now we have vendors, suppliers, partners, alliances, employees, professionals working with you, the society where they live, that we need to take care of. So this consciousness around the world and collaboration, like Margie said, it will continue to be fundamental, it will continue to exist. Bringing that to regional opportunities to Brazil, I think, yes, I see a lot of opportunities. It depends on the sector, but it needs to, the country needs to develop a more symbiotic relation between vendors, partners, and alliances. There is a room for improvement on that relations between that, and also to putting in place a more risk monitoring system, more mature risk and monitoring system to do implementations in technologies and other type of things with less risk to the stakeholders. Other challenges that the country will continue to have, I believe, in the near future is the macroeconomic volatility for investors and make those investments for a big regional center of excellence and distribution. Also, lack of visibility in terms of revenue. The biggest difficulties that I see the CEOs managing and driving a strategy is because they really have a lot of uncertainty in their revenue. So it's also, on the other hand, difficult to make the investments and do their business case for investments. And a lot of operational risks in the country, like you have certain strikes. This will hurt a lot the logistics and all of that. So it's basically a lot of opportunities, but the country needs to do, and it's not only government, it's also companies need to drive that. And we as a leader need to put that in place with big plan to drive those type of infrastructure investments that the country needs, like in ports, airports, rail, and roads, and so on. Other type of things, touches that concerns whoever is trying to invest in regional diversification. It's inflation control for the country. It's a big issue that will be difficult. It makes things difficult to be managed in a high inflation. And how are we going to be able to create new jobs and drive that? So with this unemployment rate, it's a big issue of consumption in the country. And also, if there is not a reasonable consumption in the country, it's difficult to justify a center of distribution in the country. So I do see a lot of opportunities to Brazil, but I see a lot, on the other hand, I see a lot of things to be done yet. And those challenges are not the easy ones.
I think we've been struggling with those challenges for some decades now, but hopefully the pandemic will serve as sort of a push for Brazil to, one, look at this opportunity more closely, and Alteida, as you said, really try to fix the current barriers that we have. Kami, do you agree from sort of a very practical company outlook? Is HP sort of trying to shift and be more of a regional provider? How does that work?
Yeah, good point, Gabriela. Actually, I can talk about that because I implemented basically all the industrial activities that HP has in Brazil, which is the most integrated manufacturing ecosystem inside HP worldwide. And with all the difficulties and challenges and opportunities that Brazil represent. Before answering the Brazil question, we need to look at the global movement. China is not necessarily or anymore the lowest cost country. It depends how you evaluate the cost. If you are talking about labor cost, that's also raising 20% a year. You need to have an end-to-end view of the business. So what drives China's success is not only their cost, it's their ecosystem. They have developed the ecosystem. Even you find a cheaper labor any other place in the world, you cannot move that ecosystem. It's not, the cheap labor may be started, but rapidly you need a strategy, country plan, tax policies, and business-friendly environment to develop education, development of your workforce, your logistics, supply chain network, technology, all these things is a part of big country plan. And you do it in a coordinated way as a one country plan. It happened in Singapore. I did a lot of correlation between Singapore and area of of countries in Brazil, like Manaus. They started in early 60s. Singapore went from $1 to $150 billion operations with a world-class workforce and technology, and basically become the center of the world, connecting the world with the Asia, and in Brazil we went from 1 billion to 2 billion, and is still struggling how to do basic health and COVID related situation under control in a given part of the country. So that has changed, and with that change, the question is how you leverage these opportunities to build new ecosystem. Brazil is part of emerging countries, but they are not the same. When you visit India and you come to Brazil, you realize that you cannot put these countries together. Brazil has a lot more infrastructure, technology, industry, network, roads, airports. So this is something that Brazil has. But on the other side, the number of engineers that India develop every year, it's 30 times more than Brazil. So this is kind of the situation that we need to realize that yes, Brazil has all these benefits. We have rich in natural assets. We have all these capabilities, but we need to stop to be country of future and be country of today. We need to use that. It's like you have a very talented person, but they never use their talent. You need to come to that realization and use it. And one of the things that I hear most, even inside the country, Brazil needs to grow up and become a country of today and not a promise of future. And obviously there are several elements for that. And I believe a lot in Brazil. We have, HP has invested a lot in Brazil, continue to investing, but the point is we need to have more clarity for business. It becomes a joke when you say in country, when it comes to tax, even the past is uncertain. How you deal and talk to investor that even the past is uncertain in Brazil. They cannot deal with that. And in a world that capital and investment, there are many options, many options. You are sitting at the board of multinational company, and you need to allocate capital, as Altair said. What is the first job of a CEO? Allocating capital, right? And what they do, they have opportunity in India, in Southeast Asia, in Eastern Europe, in other places, and you have also Brazil. And you put all these things together, which one represent better return on investment? Which one has better country plan, better policies? Which one has better predictability? And you allocate that. And one confusion I see in Brazil, people believe that you can change the supply chain of the companies with the policy that you develop today for next month implementation. Multinational companies, they are designing their supply chain factory footprint for the next 5 to 15 years. If you lose that train, you will not get in that train for the next 5 to 15 years. This is the realization that we need to reach, that if you want faster development, get on the train in the right timing, be part of the company's strategy, listen to them, how they make decision, and translate those drivers in your country policies and laws, etc., to make it business-friendly environment. If you don't do that, you will continue to become a promise of the future because you have the talent, you have the assets, but you don't organize them on a proper way to create value and wealth. This is my view.
Thank you, Kami. And I absolutely share your frustration. And I think Altair also put it really well. We recently had a conversation with Pedro Passos, the founder of Natura. I mean, such an icon for Brazil. And he said something that's very interesting, that he wanted Brazilians to be less comfortable and less okay with where we are as a country today. We need to be more impatient and demand more from ourselves, from the private sector, and from government. Otherwise, we'll, as you said, we'll always be the country of the future, but the future will be happening for everybody else or other countries, and we'll still be trying to get on the train, as you said. And I think we're at the time to close. I know that we could have spent another 4 hours here discussing this, and we're so happy, Margie, that the electricity held, no crashes. So maybe if I could very quickly, 30 seconds from each of you, and as Margie, I'll start with you. What are one of the biggest opportunities for supply chains, or coming out of this pandemic, and one of the biggest challenges? So for each of you, sort of just so we can round it up.
There we go. Thank you so much, and thank you once more for the opportunity. So much, Camille, of what you said resonated with me sitting here in South Africa, and I see so many opportunities for so many countries. If we can ensure that the obligation that resides in the privilege of leadership is upheld, if we are going to be thinking beyond self and thinking about future generations and what we need to do in order to respond, that is vital. But coming back, Gabriela, to your closing point, I think that without a doubt, collective action will enable us to better respond to societal, environmental, and the economic challenges that face us, globally and in the countries in which we reside. And that will enable us to improve resilience and preparedness. It's absolutely central to improve resilience, to improve visibility across our supply systems, in an effort to ensure that there's digital transformation that enables that, so that we can foster this global supply system visibility, which allows us to make the decisions about the risk that either we're able to predict through using that information, or enable to respond with agility. That is resilience. You need agility for resilience, and agility only comes with information. That is going to require us to build trust-based collective action groups and collaborate far more closely across industry sectors, with international bodies, with governments, and with one another, if we are to address the significant challenges that are faced by what is truly a global village.
Gabriela, quick response for a great question. First, the big opportunity is implement technology, improving revenue, reducing costs based on what we have discussed. Big challenge, implementing technology, because definitely needs to attract investment. So you need to have an ESG agenda, and you need to show returns. You need to have an infrastructure. So attract the investments will be a big challenge to all of us.
Kumi, the last word is yours.
Yeah, hard to add, but I would say that from my perspective, a good global strategy at companies level to make sure that all these things are translated to right people, good talented people, and infrastructure and technology to respond fast, because we will face new unprecedented situations down the road. The point is how fast you can react. Do you have assets, people, infrastructure to deal with that? We cannot predict the future, but we can have the elements. It's like a 3D printing. You never know what you need, but if you have something like 3D printing on space, you can basically create the tool instantaneously the way you want it. So we need to become a 3D printer for the world. So which means, the right technology in the right place and good strategy to get it done. Speed and agility is key. So, and technology and right people can enable that.
Thank you, Kami. And I'm actually very happy with the whole discussion, but perhaps most of all that there's a real sort of upbeat sense from all of you. A lot of challenges, but there's a lot of good that can come out of this pandemic. And I think, being part of ICC and being an organization that was created for global cooperation as well as WEF, I think it's good to hear all of you stressing that we need more collaboration, more cooperation than less. Isolation and shutting everybody else off will not be the answer for us. So it's sort of, we have to keep going and really finding opportunities to collaborate and look at everything really literally globally. So it's not about what impacts me and how do I become better, but how do everybody else around me and around the globe become better. Again, Margie, Altair, Kami, thank you so much for a really stimulating discussion. Thank you everybody who sent questions. I tried to insert them during the conversation, and I really did think that you three answered them. And again, thank you for Lefosse for the support for today. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gabriela, and to the ICC. Thank you, Carmen, Margie.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.